Hi guys, I'm back with another exciting deck tech. Rather than dabbling in the world of jank modern brews or variants, I decided to do something a little different. Fun little fact about me: before I became a modern player and a standard player, doing a lot of 60 card limited, draft seal, what have you, I actually played nothing but EDH. I sincerely believe EDH is one of the best gateway games or formats for Magic the Gathering, and it definitely was a passion of mine for a while. So much that I actually just recently liquidated about, 20 or so EDH decks, leaving only about 7 left. Uh, because I simply didn't have time to play them all. And now that I'm playing even less of the format in general, there was no need for me to have that many decks. Anyway, I wanted to do a deck tech because I got to play EDH for the first time in 6 months yesterday, and it was an interesting it was an interesting experience because I convinced my friend to let me run one of my favorite commanders of all time, the Grand Calcutron. Now, if you're a regular EDH player, you either know that name and automatically your eyes wince and you just kind of gave me a look of disgust, or you're new and you're not really familiar with this particular special commander. That's okay, because today we're going to be talking all about it and what you can do to maximize your build of it. As a little bit of disclaimer, I actually wasn't even considering doing this as a deck tech. I mean, or doing any EDH commander deck tech for that matter. But I was galvanized by a few well-known content creators to actually, they seem interested. So, like, why not? I really like the deck. I like the concept. It was fun to brew around this really weird, bizarre card that doesn't really see play. And it was just a fun creative process. I think the best thing you can do with a commander or a deck in general is use the deck to not only express your skill in deck building, but as a way to express yourself, as sort of an extension of your identity, or find ways to be clever or do cool or fun things. I think that the uncards really provide a unique opportunity for us to do that. Anyway, I'm hoping you like it, so let's get into the deck tech. Okay, so let's start by going over the commander. The Grand Calcutron. White and a blue. Legendary artifact. When the Grand Calcutron enters the battlefield, each player's hand becomes a program. An ordered row of revealed cards. Players can only play the first card of their program. If a card we put into a player's hand from anywhere, that player reveals it and places it anywhere within their program instead. At the beginning of each player's end step, if that program has fewer than 5 cards, they draw cards equal to the difference. Now, for simplicity's sake, I would also like to read the notes and rules information for Grand Calcutron because, if you can't tell, it's a bit of a hassle to get going. So let's get going on that too. When the Grand Calcutron enters the battlefield, all players take their hands and place them face up on the table. Then they then order them as they choose in a row called a program. The only card they may cast is the first card in their program. Whenever a card would go to a player's hand, they drew it, it got bounced, etc., that player can put that card anywhere in their program they wish. At the beginning of each end step, if you have fewer than 5 cards in your program, you draw cards until you have 5. So, a good way to look at these two rulings is that while your maximum hand size doesn't change, you still have a max hand size of 7. It's pretty much a minimum hand size of 5, which is kind of fun. As you'll see with the deck, there's a lot of different ways to abuse this. Your program is still your hand. If you discard a card, it goes from your program to your graveyard. This is just saying your hand is just formatted differently. It's a program now. It's still a hand. It can still be a discard from. So all those players playing sick Nicol Bolas decks or Wheel of Fate decks, they're still going to be able to get you. After the Grand Calcutron leaves the battlefield, players pick their cards up and put them back into their hand. They are no longer public and no longer follow the rules of Grand Calcutron. So if you destroy, remove, exile, bounce, turn Grand Calcutron into a tree via Song of Dryads, essentially the game is over. Your minigame of Robo Rally, fun fact what this card was based on, is over and you go back to a normal game of Commander. So that's fun. Now, this next ruling is the most important one, and I saved it for laughs. In Commander games allowing Silverboard commanders, the Grand Calcutron can be your commander. So this is an official ruling. Another quick little story. Mark Rosewater actually was asked, hey, is the Order of the Widget going to get a legendary commander like the rest of the groups from Babylovia? And he responded, yes, the Grand Calcutron was supposed to be the leader, and he was actually supposed to have text on it that said, this card can be played as your commander, but they simply ran out of space because it has a library of like a wall of text in its text box. So this card can be played as your commander in Commander games that allow silver border cards. So this is more of a weird kind of nod to the fact that you can run for a commander, since if you're already running silver border cards, it's inherently casual. But my belief of Commander in general in EDH is that it is a casual format. It's meant for fun. It's meant to do wild and exciting things like this. And it shouldn't be hindered by someone being really anal about rules. I mean, heaven forbid, we have people who run the Nephilim and no one gives bats a second eye when you go like, hey, can I use this as my commander? It was for a long time accepted, yeah, you can. But if someone wants to use an actual leader for the Order of the Widget, they kind of get side-eyed looks. Even more so than normal uncommanders. Anyway, that's the commander. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to run, and there's a lot of different synergies I'm excited to get into. So rather than just showing you a list and listing off the different cards that you see there, I figured I'd do something a little different with this deck tech. Because, as I said, I have the philosophy that Commander and EDH, it's a chance to express yourself. Your deck is more than just a list of cards that got put together. It's an extension of yourself. It's a chance to show off your creativity, your deck building skill, among other things. It's part of who you are. I mean, we all have those people who have those pet cards like, yeah, that's Steve. I can tell that's one of Steve's green decks. Why? He's running Giant Badger. He always puts Giant Badger in his deck. It doesn't matter that the card's terrible. He tries to make it work. Or that's Frank. Frank always feels the need to run mono blue control, and he specifically always runs those Portal 3 Kingdom counter spells. You know, the terrible ones, just to say he countered a spell with it. So it's stuff like that that make me feel like just giving you a deck list is just lazy and uncreative. So consequently, I'll just give you some categories, and I'll tell you the cards that are in them and why I feel they're good. So each of those categories are the following: cycling cards, Spellshapers, Suspend cards, passive removal, and this is a blue-white deck, so prison pieces. However, before I get into those, I wanted to cover some specific cards that I felt were very beneficial for the deck. This first one is an all-star, and actually one of the reasons I decided to make the video and make the deck in general, and that is Gusta's Scepter. It is a 0-drop artifact from Alliances. If Gusta's Scepter leaves play or you lose control of it, put all cards under Gusta's Scepter into your graveyard. Tap. Put any card from your hand face down under Gusta's Scepter. You may look at that card at any time. Tap. Return any card under Gusta's Scepter to your hand. Now, this may not seem like much, and in fact, the card isn't particularly exciting. In a normal deck, you could use it to save one card in your hand from a wheel or a few until it gets blown up and then it goes to your graveyard. Not that exciting. But in this deck, it's really good because you get to like trim and alter your hand and move cards around to where you want them to be. I really like Gusta's Scepter in this deck. It's a great way to abuse it. And worst comes to worst, you're exiling a card under. It's kind of like a weird exile loop because you know you're going to be drawing up to 5 at the end of the turn. Honestly, Gusta's Scepter, it doesn't seem like it, but as a 0-drop artifact, it's an MVP. It's one of the best cards to abuse with Grand Calcutron. I didn't look on EDH Rec, but I bet the number for it's high. I mean, the number of Grand Calcutron decks lists aren't probably high, but I guarantee you if they're doing it, they should run a Gusta's Scepter. Staple of the deck. After that, we have the classic Merfolk Looter, which is just good for... looting and trimming your hand. Draw a card, discard a card. 2 mana, and it's good. However, there's a few cards in this deck that I wanted to run that were similar, but they were just cards I always wanted to run. And so I'm going to spotlight this card that I feel like should be ran in more blue decks, but I understand why it's not. Bonded Fetch. It's 2 and a blue, creature homunculus from Future Sight. You'll notice that sexy border. It is a future shifted card, so it is supposed to show up in a future set sometime. It has Defender and Haste. And you're like, oh, that's weird. Why does it have that? Well, tap, draw a card, then discard a card. It is a 0/2. So you have a hasted Merfolk Looter for 1 more mana, and I really like that because Merfolk Looters, or Looters in general, are pretty fragile. Without haste, there's a good chance they'll die before you can get any passive value. Once it has haste, I've noticed, at least in games, people seem de-incentivized to destroy it if you've gotten at least one use out of it. They're like, oh, what's the point now? I've noticed a lot of EDH players tend to have this all-or-nothing mentality, which I don't necessarily agree with. But hey, if that's the way they want to live their life and play their game, more power to them and more power to you. The next card is actually new tech, as in the last set, and that is Smothering Tithe. I'm sure many of you already know what it is, but for posterity, I'll read it. Smothering Tithe, 3 and a white. Enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token. With tap, sacrifice this token, add a mana of any color. So Smothering Tithe is soon to become a new mono white staple, or it's ramp in white in colors that don't normally have ramp. Or for colors that don't normally have ramp. It is an excellent card. Now, in this deck, it's particularly excellent because Grand Calcutron's draw ability, which is a drawback, has amazing synergy with this. So your opponent's minimum hand size has to be 5, and they're incentivized based on Grand Calcutron to keep playing, which means so you're going to be drawing a card at the beginning of each turn. But then they also have to draw up to 5 at the end of their turn, which means every time they do that, let's say on average they're going through 2 cards in their hand and they've drawn to 6 at the beginning of their turn. They go through 2 cards, that's an extra treasure at the end because they're drawing to 5. But if they play any more, it's like, oh, I'm getting 3 treasure a turn, 4 treasure a turn, possibly up to 6 treasure a turn. It's insane. Smothering Tithe in this deck is gross. I'll tell you right now, it's not my current version because I haven't gone Smothering Tithe yet. I need to get on that. I love Grand Calcutron. Smothering Tithe with Grand Calcutron works so well. I'm just so excited about this energy. I mean, aren't you? Okay, maybe not. Anyway, let's go on to the next card. We have Archmage's Ascension, which is a really great card in EDH. It is hard to work, but I'll just read it and explain it. Archmage's Ascension. It is 2 and a blue. Enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you drew 2 or more cards this turn, you may put a quest card on Archmage Ascension. Okay, so given how Grand Calcutron works, that's very easy. You just need to play 2 cards out of your hand, which with your program ordering and all the card selection you have, it should be very easy to do. Let's keep going. As long as Archmage Ascension has 6 or more quest counters on it, if you would draw a card, you may instead search your library for a card and put that into your hand and then shuffle your library. So essentially it changes all of your draws into tutors. It turns them all into demonic tutors. In mono blue. You have the ultimate form of card selection. So Archmage Ascension is actually, and I know Bloodchief Ascension and Luminarch Ascension and Beastmaster Ascension are the more commonly played one, but if you're into drawing cards like I am, Archmage Ascension is probably the best Ascension of the cycle. I know, hot take. And in Modern, it's currently Pyromancer's Ascension, because everyone's hot on it for Phoenix, which I don't even get me started. Archmage Ascension in this deck is so stupid strong. And you're essentially always going to be getting a quest counter every turn. The real downside to running it, even though I run it in my version, is that it's 6 quest counters. It takes so long to activate. Normally when I play it, if I get to use it, people ignore it, in fact, or they'll barter with me to let me keep it around because it can tutor anything. I essentially become appropriate enough with Blue-White, the Fun Police. The reason I get away with running it is even if I'm not the Fun Police is that because the deck has a heavy prison and stacks element, it's really easy to lock people out from interacting with my stuff, unfortunately. And with Grand Calcutron, I see it coming. As Patrick Stewart said, it's too late, I've seen everything. So I'm able to react reasonably enough to keep it around. So those are the interesting cards that don't really fall into any particular category. So let's get into the first section. So let's talk about cycling. So cycling is an ability that some cards have where you can pay a mana cost, discard the card, and draw a card. Now, there are some variants on that where instead they have specific card cycling like plane cycling, island cycling, basic land cycling. Now, it's a similar ability, but rather than drawing a card, you search your library for that particular type of card you're cycling for. Now, the reason these cards are so good in Grand Calcutron specifically is because this is an activated ability that you activate from your hand, which means that you are not obligated to, it doesn't need to be the first card in your program to use it. So the card's not dead if it's not the first card in your program. And furthermore, some cards in particular have abilities that happen when they cycle. So that gives you an added bonus of using the card. So I'm not going to go through the list of all the cycling cards. Rather, I'm going to touch on one or two that I found to be particularly useful for different reasons. So one that has an active or not an activated ability that has an additional triggered ability when cycles is Nimble Obstructionist. Nimble Obstructionist itself is 2 and a blue for a creature bird wizard that has flash and flying, and you can cycle it for the same cost. When you cycle Nimble Obstructionist, counter target activated or triggered ability you don't control. So it can't be used to stifle your own ability, like you couldn't stifle your own Grand Calcutron when it enters the battlefield. However, having a stifle effect in your hand, even though everyone can see it, is very, very useful. At the very least, it gives you some leverage on when to use it. That way you can also draw the card, but, also get some use of it. 2 for 1 is usually good, and I think that's great. Another one I highly recommend running is a Chroma's Vengeance, because your deck will need board wipes. It's an EDH deck, you're always going to need board wipes. This is 4 white. Destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Cycle 3 colorless. So the upside of a Chroma's Vengeance is it's not going to be dead in your hand early game, but late game when you draw it, you're going to be able to use it, which is really, really important. And of course, so this is a card I think is actually actively terrible. I love the cycle of cards, except this one. I think this one's utter trash, but it's on color and it helps fix your mana, and that is a Migratory Route. I don't like the card. I'll read it for you real quick. 3 white and a blue. Create 4 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying. So from a design standpoint, I know why they had to make it that expensive. It's just the card I think is trash. But it's 2 mana and it fetches you a basic land, so that's cool. One other card of note that I like in particular is Angel Song. It's a 2 mana fog, and it can cycle for 2 colorless. Again, it's never dead, and sometimes you're going to need that fog. One that just has normal cycling that I particularly like to use is Forsake the Worldly. I really like being able to just exile target artifact or enchantment for 3 mana, and 2 colorless mana cycle isn't bad. Honestly, if you look up the number of cycling cards in blue, white, and colorless, there's actually quite a lot of them, and I encourage you to do that. There's a lot of fun things you can do with the Sarcophagus, among other cards, and well, I'm not going to run those in my version. I'm not even going to list them here. I encourage you to do the research, check them out, see what you can find, and make something fun. If you want to lean harder into the cycling deck, run New Perspective as well. That's a card that makes your cycling cost 0. Grab Fluctuator, run that. Just have some fun with it. So let's touch on Suspend cards. Suspend cards are very similar to cycling cards, where they allow you to essentially get use of the card in your hand without having it to be the first card in your program. There's a lot of additional uses for that. I find Suspend to be a great way to cheat mana cost in more ways than one. And I figured I'd just highlight a few that may or may not be in my deck, but I just found them to be very cool. There's the ever classic card that keeps getting put into commander sets, Deep Sea Kraken. It's a big boy for very little cost, and I think it's great. After that, we have Ith, Hierarcanus. It is a Maze of Ith on a stick. If you know the lore, that is the character that Maresil captured and slowly drained his power. He's not a particularly amazing card, but you're only getting him for 2 mana, so that's pretty cool. Other than that, we have Lotus Bloom, which if you wait 3 turns, becomes a full-grown Black Lotus. So yay for that. It's a 0-drop artifact, so it's essentially a cycler in your deck, because it's getting out of your hand, and you're going to draw a card at the end of your turn with a Grand Calcutron. 2 particular ones I wanted to highlight were Chronomatic Escape and Reality Strobe. Now, these cards are particularly exciting because after they resolve, they exile themselves with 3 time counters, which means essentially the spells keep happening over and over and over and over again. So over longer games, you get this passive, just free value, and you never have to worry about casting it because it just keeps coming back. Now, these aren't broken, but it is, again, free value, which is super dope. Other than that, a lot of the Suspend cards I personally ran are just low-cost 1-drop Suspend cards because, again, they're free, and they're eventually going to come out as creatures, and I don't mind playing these small, 1/1, or these 2/2s for 1, Suspend 4, or whatever amount they are, just to get some extra value from abusing Grand Calcutron, because what you're doing is you're getting all this value, and you're still having all this freedom and flexibility with your deck, while your opponent doesn't. And that means a lot when you're walking out their ability to play the game normally. Okay, now we're going to touch on Spellshapers, and a Honestly, Spellshapers are actually some of my favorite cards in Commander in general, even outside of this deck. So, Spellshapers are cards that originally appeared in Mercadian Mask, and they are actually very on the nose in how they're described. So, Spellshapers were creatures that you could pay a certain amount of mana, tap it, discard a card, and essentially, by discarding that card and paying that mana cost, you're turning that card into a spell, depending on the creature. So, it was a very unique way to make sure you never had dead cards. So, when you had Spellshaper on the field, you never had just a land that you didn't need in your hand. You could pay the mana, tap it, and then you essentially get whatever spell the Spellshaper would give you. So, in this deck, much like the other cards I mentioned, Spellshapers are great because they allow you to take dead cards out of your hand. They allow you to like essentially sculpt your program and have all these extra spells and effects and things you can do. And so none of the cards in your hand are dead. And you're just playing cards that aren't necessarily the first card in your program because it's something else. Spellshapers in general, as I said, are just really good for this deck because they can trim the deck and make sure nothing's dead. I, however, want to highlight a few. Some I consider to be actually EDH staples, which, again, hot take, because everyone's going to tell me, like, oh, no, that card's trash. But I like them. So the first one, and this one is definitely close to being, like, a card I put in every blue deck that doesn't run green, is a favorite of mine. It is Dreamscape Artist. 1 in a blue, creature, human Spellshaper. You can pay 2 in a blue, tap. Discard a card, sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. And the art is, he's mastered the art of Sleight of Land, and he's a 1/1. So, if you don't know the spell this is referencing, and this is from, I believe, it was Planar Chaos, this is essentially a blue Harrow. So Harrow is a instant green spell that lets you pay 2 and a green, sack a land, and tutor 2 basics to the field untapped. So it's a way to ramp and generate kind of not quite card advantage, but just better card selection. And that's what Dreamscape Artist does as well. He's essentially a way in blue to ramp mana, which is very bizarre for people. It's a very unique effect. I try to include it in every blue deck that doesn't have green because being able to ramp in blue is so nice. And anytime I play this, people are always impressed, like, wow, you ended up ramping like 3 turns with it. I probably should have killed that. I'm like, yeah, you should have. It's not like it's really like on the nose great. It's just a good card. Other than that, another favorite of mine is actually from the original Mercadian Mask. It's Overtaker, 1 in blue. Now, the original text says Creature Spellshaper, but it's later was errated to be a Merfolk. So for all you fish players out there, it's a Merfolk. Its spell shaping ability is 3 in a blue. Discard a card from your hand. Untap target creature. Gain control of it until end of turn. That creature gains haste. It's no challenge to master Mercadian. And she's a 1/1. Now, the thing about Overtaker is this is from a older card called Ray of Command. A lot of you now recognize it as Act of Treason, but the cool thing about Ray of Command is that it's instant speed. So Overtaker is really good for just kind of like de-incentivizing people from swinging at you or really messing with people's combat math. I like the card a lot. I think it's really enjoyable. And overall, it's just really solid. Let's see. The other one I want to mention is... okay, so technically this is part of a 2-card cycle. But this one, I only run this one and not the other one. I like Stronghold Biologist. It's 2 in a blue. Creature Spellshaper. Again, a 1/1. But its ability is blue. Discard a card from your hand. Counter target creature spell. Again, shaping your hand and just getting good utility. It also de-incentivizes people from playing good creature spells that can be countered, because they'll see this on the field and go like, oh man, he has mana up and cards in hand. Of course he does. He's drawing up to 5. Everyone's drawing up to 5. Seems like a bad time. So, other than all these spell shapers, there's other cards that are essentially spell shapers, in that they tap and discard a card in order to generate some kind of effect. A newer one I personally enjoy is actually Thraben Standard Bearer from Eldritch Moon. It's a 1-drop. It's a 1 white. It's a creature human soldier. 1 white. Discard a card. Put a 1/1 white human soldier creature token on the battlefield. It is a 1/1. While that ability may not seem impressive, it's actually quite good for the rate you're getting, because it's a 1-drop. So if at the beginning of your program, or you can land somewhere in your program, it's really easy to put on the field. It's not hard at all. And then again, it's just generating creature advantage, and that's kind of where you want to be. The other one is actually from the same block, because if you didn't know this, Eldritch Moon and Shadows over Innistrad had a heavy madness and reanimation theme. Because unsurprisingly, Innistrad is the graveyard block. So another one I like is another low drop one called Stern Constable. He is white. He's a creature human soldier. Tap, discard a card, tap a creature. It just, that's kind of where you want to be. It's a real good low drop. It helps you sculpt your hand, and it can really mess with combat and make it difficult for your opponent to actually do anything. Now, am I saying Stern Constable is going to win you the entire board? No, that's not true. But again, you can't look at, EDH is definitely the format to windmill slam awesome stuff, and that's kind of the fun of it. You can't look at cards like Stern Constable and just go like, no, that's utter trash. Why would you run it? It's actually good. It just functions really well within the deck, and sometimes I feel like people forget that. And again, that's kind of why I didn't want to give you guys a deck list. I want you to look around. I want you to find these fun cards, these cards that make you think, that make you innovate, become smarter players, become better players, become more creative players. That's what I want. This next category isn't that large, and it's just something that I feel like is essential for the deck, and that's passive removal. Now, this is just spells, enchantments, artifacts that you can put on the field that can later be sacrificed or used in certain ways that can stop combat or destroy artifacts or enchantment. These aren't particularly exciting, and as the meme says, it ain't much, but it's honest work. So a lot of these are like Seal of Removal, Seal of Cleansing, Dispeller Capsule. Soul Snares is surprisingly a great one that I enjoy. The kind of tech one that I've always wanted to run and never got a chance to, so I put in this tech, was Gossamer Chains. It's this kind of weird bounce effect from Visions. I think it's a lot of fun, but these cards are really great just deterring attacks from coming at you or dealing with problematic threats, or at the very least, realistically, they're rattlesnakes. But with the way Grand Calcutron plays, it creates this weird politics game where you have removal on the field and you know they have this card in hand. So you essentially can save it for the threat you know, and the table will actually try to negotiate with you in order to make sure, like, don't you blow that now. Don't you waste that. He has this in hand, and he can play it at any time. He can rearrange his program. He can get there. So we got to keep it open for that. The great thing about Grand Calcutron is there's no secrets. Therefore, this kind of removal is actually really good and has this, like, extra layer of political goodness that I personally enjoy in EDH games. Okay, now we're going to talk about what I consider to be the most fun cards to play and what many people consider to be the most fun card or unfun cards to play against. They are in the wheelhouse of blue-white, and that is the Stacks, Prison, or Pillow Folk cards, which essentially allow you to do degenerate things or, again, act as the fun police. A lot of you are going to know what most of these are. I'm just going to run through a few of them because at least some unique ones that I enjoy running, or ones that have special synergies with the decks. But mainly, this is just like blue-white cards I always want to run. I used to run a Guafa Hazid Profiteer deck, and it wasn't that good, but it was just all the enchantments in it were good enough to the point where no one liked playing against it because it was literally just the most unfun, unenjoyable deck ever, and I can understand. I personally enjoyed it. I thought it was hilarious, but apparently no one else did. Anyway, let's get into that spice. The first card we have is another card from Visions. It is called Equipoise. Equipoise? I don't know. I'm not really that good, but Equipoise sounds right. Feel free to comment or leave a comment and tell me how wrong I am. Equipoise. 2 and a white. Enchantment from Visions. During your upkeep, for each land target player controls in excess of the number of lands you control, target land he or she control phases out. Repeat this process for artifacts and then for creatures. So this is just kind of a passive balance effect that checks at every upkeep. I really like balance effects. I like that balance effects are the most unbalanced cards in Magic. I'm really bummed that balance is illegal in Commander, but I completely understand why. It is a gross and disgusting card. And as many people will say, it is Magic the way Richard Garfield intended, which is degenerate. Okay, next up is actually a creature, which doesn't often factor into this, but I call this the Budget Humility, and it's actually starting to climb up in price too, but I enjoy it a lot. And it is Godhead of Awe, and these are all, it costs 5 hybrid blue-white, so any combination of blue and white 5 times gets you a creature spirit avatar, flying, pretty whatever. It's a 4/4, and other creatures are 1/1s. So it essentially blanks all their power and toughness. They still have all their abilities and everything, but no matter what, their base power and toughness are now 1/1. This card is surprisingly effective. Avacyn, Angel of Hope, seems a lot less scary when she's just an indestructible 1/1 that makes all of your other 1/1s indestructible. I consider her to be the peak fair card, and I definitely don't hate drawing her or hate playing her. Next up is a pair, and that is Kismet and Frozen Aether. The reason they are a pair is because they are literally the same card in two different colors. Frozen Aether is a planar chaos color shifted card, hence the inverse border. So color shifted cards were cards from planar chaos that were literally pound for pound the exact same card as a previous card, except it had been moved to another color and adjusted accordingly. So Kismet and Frozen Aether are 3 and a blue or 3 and a white, respectively, enchantments, and both of them read, artifact, creatures, and lands your opponent's control come to the play tapped. And that's just some good old-fashioned stacking right there. It's just making sure that your opponents can't play the game the way you want to, and you get to play as much as you want. Up next is another pair of cards, and that is Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and Thalia, Heretic Cathar. Thalia and Thicker Thalia are both excellent cards. They see play in Modern, Legacy, EDH, and during their time in Standard. They're both excellent cards. They help to lock down the board in different ways. And I'm not going to read them because they're so ubiquitous. They're just really strong cards. Admittedly, they're cards you can remove, but I really enjoy playing them. Now, up next is what I consider a bit more of a tech card. This card probably is going to be popular on more competitive builds, and this is more of a psychological card than anything else. So we have Underworld Connections, which, as you know, will enchant a land and give you a kind of sort of Phyrexian Arena setup. You can tap it and draw a card and lose a life. I consider this to be the blue equivalent, and this is from all the way back in Prophecy. It is Sunken Field. 1 in a blue, enchant land. Enchanted land has tap. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. So, essentially, you can turn a basic land you're not really using into a Force Spike. This kind of falls under passive threats, but it's just a really, really great card. Essentially, being able to tax your opponent's spells and mana by 1 mana, it's just a really solid way to make sure that they're going to have a bit of a rougher go at the game. Anyway, speaking of having a rougher go at the game, we have Grand Arbiter Augustin IV. Now, if you played any amount of EDH with any amount of consistency, you know GAA4. You know what a pain in the ass he is. He is the most obnoxious card to play against. If you see them, you see it at the table across from you, you know it's not going to be like a token stack. You know it's going to be a disgusting stack deck. So he's in the deck just because he makes everything I play cheaper and everything my opponents play more expensive. If you're in the colors, it's hard not to play him. Also, fun fact is that anytime someone complains about me running down Grand Calcutron, I'm like, okay, do you mind if I grab my alternate commander from the deck and I'll just put in like a basic land? They're like, oh yeah, sure, that's fine. I pull out Grand Arbiter Augustin IV from the deck, set him down in the command zone, and start looking for a basic land. This has happened literally, like, I've only played Grand Calcutron, I want to say like 30 or so times, which is still a surprising amount for some of you. I really enjoy the commander. I'd say, at least 17 of those times the person's gone, you know what? I'll make an exception. You can play Grand Calcutron this time, but that is not going to be your commander. I'm like, are you sure? You said no. I'd rather play with the silly rules than deal with like Grand Arbiter. So yeah, go ahead and put him back in. Other than that, we have some pretty straightforward normal filler stacks cards. So we have Blind Obedience. Blind Obedience is just good. Another Enter the Battlefield tap. And the card that I don't consider to be a lock piece, because that would mean no one can play the game, but definitely draws the game to a snail's pace. Just unbelievably slow is Eidolon of Rhetoric. 2 and a white, enchantment creature, spirit. Each player can't cast more than one spell each turn, and it's a 1/4. So Eidolon of Rhetoric is actually a really gross card in Commander, considering it's a format built around going wild, casting 10 and 20 spells a turn, or doing ridiculous stuff. Grand Calcutron making it so you can only cast the first card of your program, plus Eidolon of Rhetoric, means the game moves so slow. But again, that's why you had all these passive advantage effects. You have cards like Sunken Field, you have your Seals of Cleansing out. You have all these things giving you advantage in your ability to do things, whereas your opponent can't. You're cycling cards and getting effects. You're not casting spells. Eidolon of Rhetoric is such a good card for the deck. I just can't help but enjoy running it. Another card of note that I run in this deck that I think is a hot take. Now, in general, Planeswalkers are really bad for Commander, and I 100% agree with that. I, however, do run Dovin Bond, and I personally really enjoy running Dovin Bond in Commander. Now, unsurprisingly, much like in his standard performance, he doesn't do much. He ticks up and eventually just slowly hinders creatures. You can tick him down to gain 2 life and draw a card, which is fine. But given how oppressive the deck can be, it's everything short of running Ensnaring Bridge and Chalice. There is a realistic chance you will get his emblem. Now, his other abilities, I'm not even going to bother reading. I'm going to put them on the screen so you can see them. But his ultimate, which you should never bank on Game of Planeswalker's ultimate, but I have before in this one. I have gotten the ultimate in Commander games. You get an emblem with, your opponents can't tap more than 2 permanents during their untap steps. So that's a pretty nice card. That's a pretty great. I enjoy, is it Static Orb? I believe it's Static Orb that has the exact same wording. I enjoy locking out people. I think it's funny. I know I'm a terrible person and I deserve to die. I'm sure I'm going to get all the hate in the comments, and it's completely deserved. I and Grand Calcutron completely deserve your hatred on that. Other than that, there's stuff like Meekstone, Island Sanctuary. There's going to be some cards I haven't mentioned. Propaganda, Grocery Prison. All the stat cards. If you played any amount of EDH, you know how to lock out your opponents. I'm not going to lecture you on this. I only wanted to go on about a few niche cards that I thought were really cool. And I hope you thought was cool. I hope you thought they were cool as well. So, other than all these different types of cards that function really well with the deck that I mentioned, I think that the important thing that I did when I made this deck was just to run some fun cards. I ran a copy of Myth Realize because I really love that card. That's such a fun and exciting card. It's a unique design. I ran Ragna's Sanction because that's just newer versions. It's just a fun and unique card that you don't really see a lot of people run or do. One particular card that has nothing to do with the theme of the deck, other than being a really good blocker that I enjoyed running, was Abu Jafar, actually from Arabian Nights. I think it's just such a fun, unique card. And there's no rhyme or reason, but if I can impart one thing to you more than anything, not necessarily just about uncommanders or just having, or EDH in general, it's just that have fun. Run the cards you want. Have that dumb, silly card you want to run. Because you never know where you're going to run it, and someone else would be just as excited to see it. Specifically talking about Abu Jafar, I played it the other day, and then another player was like, oh my god, I remember that card. That is so cool that you're running it. You see people make jokes all the time about Uncle Esteban. It's like that, Just have fun with the deck. Heaven forbid, right? So I want to end addressing the big silver border elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about Frankie Peanuts. Okay, that joke was bad, even by my standards. So, and that's just simply that for a lot of players, local game stores, and play groups, silver border commanders are frowned upon, and furthermore are actually considered abhorrent or a blight upon the game. For those people, while I do strongly disagree with them, because I am of the belief that Commander is about having fun, and you should let people have their fun, and that's why I ask people's permission to run it, because I want to acknowledge their stake in it, is that I have to admire their passion for the game to elicit such a strong negative response. I prefer that they would do things other than calling names or getting super aggressive about it. But in order to elicit that response, they have to really, really care about the game. And I think that's wonderful. If I can end on a positive note, though, I just want to say that more than anything, I hope you have fun. Whether it's building this deck or building your own, I hope you find your Abu Jafar. I hope you find that one card that makes you smile and that you put in every deck. I hope that you can enjoy the satisfying feeling of sitting down with a group of friends and drawing 7 cards and saying, turn 1 Soul Ring. And that isn't to say you're head on board. Rather, I want you to just enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself, have fun, be creative while you're making decks, and just have a good time. I'm starting to tear up a little. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm a bad content creator, so make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Or if you hate my video, comment about how I'm trash. Comment about my looks. Comment about my appearance, my way I talk, the fact that I wheezed a few times in there. And don't forget to share. Like or hate it. Like it, share it with your friends. Tell them about it. Hate it, share it and make fun of me. I don't mind. Go for it. Anyway, I hope either way, no matter how you feel about it, I hope you go out and have fun.